Poverty with Perspective, Using the SPM to Infer Basic Capabilities, by Elena Diller and Jennifer Cicenti.
So what exactly is poverty, and who are the poor in America? Can you tell if any of the people in these pictures are impoverished? The truth is, we can't tell. Poverty cannot be judged solely by looking at the surface of a person.
The word poverty can be perceived in many different ways. We believe that the impoverished should be defined as those who lack basic capabilities due to their lack of economic resources. To put it simply, if someone is unable to achieve a goal that is essential in leading a dignified life, we say they lack a basic capability. If the reason they cannot achieve that goal is because they do not have the financial backing, we say they are poor. Therefore, we argue that the Supplemental Poverty Measure, or SPM, is the preferable way to measure poverty in the United States because we can use it to infer a person's capabilities.
To give you a clearer concept of what a capability is, Martha Nussbaum, a leading writer on the issue of poverty, has defined 10 central capabilities of which all humans must have an adequate level in order to lead a dignified life. We have included a few of these in order to give a clear idea of what a capability is. For someone to have the most basic capability of life, he or she must be able to live a life that is worth living and is not unfairly cut short. It is a central capability to feel emotions towards others around us, rather than solely focusing on ourselves. Taking time to oneself to play, laugh, and enjoy life is an essential capability. Others may feel that certain capabilities, such as play, are not necessary to live, but because we are concerned with a person's quality of life, we argue that such capabilities are important. In the case of play, social stimulation in a low-stress environment encourages personal growth and development of character through healthy interactions with others. However, because we are only considering poverty in the United States, many of Nussbaum's points are not relevant in our discussion, as most of them are protected by our government and/or they are not contingent on financial resources. For example, Nussbaum's basic capability of bodily integrity is protected by the illegalization of sexual assault in the United States. Capabilities we are concerned about that are not mentioned by Nussbaum include the opportunity to receive basic education and medical care in the case of an emergency.
From capabilities come functionings, which are the beings or doings that a person chooses to achieve from his or her possible capabilities. However, we are primarily concerned with the capabilities rather than functionings because we believe that individuals have the dignity and freedom of choice to decide which functionings they will choose to achieve.
For example, a fasting monk and a starving child both have the same functioning of not eating, but the monk is not poor because he has the capability to eat but chooses not to. The starving child, on the other hand, does not have the capability to eat and therefore does not show the functioning of eating.
Before we can delve into our suggestions for how poverty should be measured in the United States, we must first gain an understanding of the current measurement system. Presently, the United States utilizes a measurement system called the OPM, which stands for Official Poverty Measurement. This system determines who is impoverished based on which families fall below a threshold that was created during the 1960s by Molly Orchansky. This threshold is based upon 3 times the Economy Food Plan, which is the lowest cost food plan prepared and priced by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, according to Iceland. Though the OPM takes inflation into account, because changes in standards of living are not reflected in this threshold, it is considered an absolute measure of poverty.
The second facet of the OPM is its definition of a family's resources, which consists of pre-tax gross annual income as well as cash benefits provided by the government. For a family to be considered poor, their resources must fall below the threshold.
The advantages of the OPM are that it is easy to calculate, and many government programs use it to determine who is eligible for certain near-cash or in-kind benefits. The ease of calculation of the OPM leads many people to support it because of the fallacy of measurement, in which people have the false assumption that if something is easy to measure, it is what we want to measure. The disadvantages of the OPM outweigh the advantages. Namely, the system is outdated. For example, the threshold measurement of 3 times the economy food plan made sense during the 1960s because during that time, families spent approximately 1/3 of their gross cash income on food. However, this is no longer true as food prices have dropped and families now spend more money on other needs. Other problems include that it does not take into account near cash benefits, in-kind benefits, or assets. However, some argue that this is equaled out because the OPM does not reflect taxes or non-discretionary expenses either. Non-discretionary expenses are the unavoidable cost of being a working American, including transportation to and from work and childcare. Additionally, the OPM does not expose depth of poverty, meaning that its statistics do not show who is merely near poor versus who is in severe poverty. All of these disadvantages lead to a problem because the OPM does not give the most accurate portrayal of how a family is actually doing.
So, if there are all these disadvantages to the OPM, has an alternative measurement system been proposed? Although the ideal measure for poverty in the United States would be a capabilities-based system, this would be nearly impossible to use due to the fact that capabilities can be subjective. This subjectivity is due to differing opinions on what constitutes a dignified life, as well as to what extent each capability must be present. Also, the United States does not have the task force or the budget to afford such a detailed system of measure.
An alternative poverty measure from which capabilities can be inferred is the Supplemental Poverty Measure, or SPM. The SPM is more suited for modern America than the OPM because it has been updated in several ways. Firstly, the SPM changes the unit of analysis to the household rather than the family unit used by the OPM. This takes into account the prevalence of cohabitation that is increasing in the U.S., according to Short. Secondly, the SPM redefines the threshold of poverty by taking into account money spent on food, shelter, utilities, and clothing by the 33rd percentile of Americans. It assumes that at this percentile, citizens are living a modest but comfortable lifestyle. Then, this amount of money is multiplied by 1.2 to allow for any other expenses that a family may have. Thirdly, the SPM recreates the concept of a family's resources. Rather than solely reflecting gross pre-tax income, the SPM measures resources as income plus in-kind benefits and near-cash benefits, minus non-discretionary expenses. This allows it to examine the effects of government benefits and the necessary costs of being a tax-paying working American.
Like the OPM, the SPM adjusts for family composition and inflation, but it also reflects geographical differences and changes in the standard of living.
Because the SPM takes more factors into account, it provides a more individualized representation of a family's situation than the OPM, making it a preferable poverty measure for the United States. Because it is a quasi-relative system of measurement, it provides a compromise between an absolute measure and the capabilities measure. It is an effective compromise because it takes into account basic necessities but also allots money for differing circumstances.
Because measuring capabilities is discursive rather than quantitative, it would be hard to establish a threshold for poverty using capabilities. Because of the SPM's breadth and depth of quantitative data, we can use it to reasonably infer a person's level of capabilities. For example, because the SPM takes medical out-of-pocket expenses into account as non-discretionary expenses, it can be used to see how a person's capability for bodily health is affecting his or her financial situation. This furthers the conclusion that the SPM gives a better idea of how a person is truly doing and how deeply he or she is impoverished than the OPM, making this our preferred system of measurement.